Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and we're reporting to you live after Nick was at Giants camp again for the first day of joint practices with the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions are a team that broke out in 2023, won their division, and then made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. In my mind, they probably should have won that championship game. Questionable coaching decisions in the second half, some that will be looked back on, but also just like overall, I feel like it was just the Niners had been there, done that. The Lions hadn't, so it was kind of one of those situations where they weren't able to close the deal, but clearly showed that they can compete with any team in the NFC. They're probably one of the best teams in the NFC. So I'm going to want to focus on that, but we're not going to bury the lead here, Nick. Tons of fights today. One that had Daniel Jones involved, where Jones kind of interjected himself and got in the middle of it. And then almost immediately somebody who worked for the Giants pulled him out of it. Like, what are you doing, dude? You have a red jersey on. Why the hell are you doing it? But at the same time, his teammates love it. Everybody loves that dog and him. It's been like that for a while now. Jones has had that since 2019. He's run through piles. He's taken on extra yards, running with the football as a scramble. And we've seen his teammates embrace it time after time again. So I don't think this is anything new, but at the same time, there's new teammates on the team, and they're going to love to see it, like Malik Neighbors and like Brian Burns, who discussed Jones's fight, or the fight he was involved with, I should say, after practice. But according to you, Nick, there were like 7 fights at this practice. So I think the themes today are incredibly physical joint practice of the Lions, a lot of fights, and then the big one for me, the one that actually matters, which is the Giants' first-team defense holding their own against the Lions' first-team offense. This is a first-team offense for the Lions that has been top 3 in points in back-to-back seasons. I actually think they lead the NFC and maybe the NFL, as crazy as that sounds, in points per game. That's how cashed in they have been with Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator, and obviously the offensive line they built and their run game and their play-action pass game. So where do you want to start? There's 3 major things. What stood out to you the most, Nick?
What stood out to me the most was the Giants competed, and this is only a practice, but they competed with one of the best teams, I wouldn't just say in the NFC, but I would also say in the NFL. They're up there. They were in the NFC Championship game. The Lions have adopted the persona of their coach, Dan Campbell. He's very enthusiastic, gravitating, right? Very tough. They're a very tough team. They're a very physical team in the trenches, and the Giants weren't bullied around today, especially on the defensive side of the football, and I only say that because when I was watching team periods, I was evaluating the Giants defense against the Lions offense and their offensive line. Ed was over on the other field watching the Giants offense. But by all reports, the Giants offense also was not bullied. So my key takeaway is good for you guys, New York Giants. You show the fact that you're not going to allow a team that is typically better than you on paper, a team that is a little bit more physical than you, to push you around in your house. And I appreciate that competitive nature from Brian Daboll's unit.
And they'll never be able to quantify it, Nick, but sports psychology has looked into this. And it's just interesting to me when you think about the joint practices they had with the Lions last year versus this year, and the difference in energy that we saw on the field. And that was notable from everyone who covered both practices. And, you know, there's something to being counted out in any kind of sport. I know through my career, let's call it, or just through different things I've played competitively in some sports, but also just uncompetitively, but competitive in my mind still.
Don't you play golf?
Golf is a very competitive sport, but I know in things in my life, when I'm counted out, I play my best. When my back is against the wall, I play my best. I dig deeper and I get extra motivation. And last year, the Giants were in the opposite spot. They were coming off a high. They had won a playoff game. They felt like maybe their expectations were in a different point. And now, as we've heard from a lot of people, including Daniel Jones, who did an interview with Tyler Dunne, he never does any media, any like in-depth media. He talked about how he didn't like what happened on Hard Knocks, and this is Daniel Jones. He was really disappointed with what he saw, and a lot of like, it is what it is type comments from him. Like, I guess he felt before it, like the Giants love me. I was their guy. It was all about me. And after it, they're kind of like, well, it's going to be prove it time for Jones. And now he's in this mindset too. And he even said like, I'm going to go out firing. I'm going to be aggressive this year. I'm going to throw the football down the field when the shots are there. And that's how I'm going to end this thing. And he says, I'm going to keep running too, which is also important. We need both of those things from Jones. And I think the entire Giants team feels like their back is against the wall, Nick. And that's why we're seeing a different level of energy at these practices.
These are professional athletes, man. They're going to take stuff personal. And there was like 7 fights. Andrew Phillips was getting into it with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't like the tenacity. Probably Andrew Phillips, who was on his hip, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, which sparked one of the major fights. Amon-Ra St. Brown on a drag route one-handed catch. Andrew Phillips kind of gave him a little bit something after the catch, and he was in really tight coverage. And Amon-Ra just shoved him a little bit. And then Dane Belton came flying, and he knocked the football out of Amon-Ra St. Brown's hands, and that prompted somebody else pushing him. And the next thing you know, everybody's on top of each other. It's bench clearing, and that happened. The bench clearing happened like 3 times. And then there were probably another 4 or 5 skirmishes where there were several New York Giants involved. And as you said, Daniel Jones got involved. And as Brian Burns said after practice, he got jiggy with it against a Lions defensive lineman when Greg Van Roten was on the ground being held there by that Lions defensive lineman. So you love to see the grit and the toughness displayed by the Giants.
And what an interesting scenario that's developing there with Greg Van Roten playing center now for the Giants, with John Michael Schmidt's continued shoulder issues is something that plagued him last year, plaguing him again. Who knows how long it is? We have little to no information on the Evan Neal situation. Jermaine Illuminor, from what I've seen, held his own against Hayden Hutchinson. I think Daniel Jones made a point of it after practice to say the offensive line played well and held up well. Obviously, you saw on the deep pass to Malik Neighbors that was ruled out of bounds. I don't know if everyone's seen it, but Jones connected on a deep ball to Neighbors that was ruled out of bounds that some people thought was in bounds. It's close. But what I noticed was the offensive line gave Daniel Jones a lot of time there to step through, up and through the pocket, and then kind of square his shoulders, get his whole body and base, in my opinion, settled like very, I would say, square to the throw, and really rip a nice one in there. It was more of a touch throw, but it had good juice on it too, I thought. Picked up speed as it landed on the back shoulder-ish area of Malik Neighbors. So, you know, that requires an offensive line that's going against Aiden Hutchinson. I believe they brought in DJ Reader. I don't know if he practiced today to Lions.
He didn't.
Okay. That makes it a job a lot easier for the interior offensive line.
I don't believe he did, I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hutchinson I did see out there at the very least, though. So definitely interesting. But yeah, you're right. Like, these are athletes. Like, you expect them to go 100%, and they are going 100% every time. But there's something to any human being in this psychology. If you're counted out, people are saying you're the worst team and you guys have no chance, you're going to want to prove them differently. And that energy showed up today in practice, which is something I think every Giants fan wants to see.
Absolutely. The Giants defensive line too, against the rushing attack of the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs is, by the way, just has another joystick than other football players. You can tell the movement skills of Jahmyr Gibbs. It's rare. And then as for David Montgomery, I just believe he's one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. But Brian Burns had 2, 3, maybe even 4 TFLs. Kayvon Thibodeau had a few. Dexter Lawrence was a load to block. And then when the Giants would bring in Ryder Anderson or Timmy Horn or Elijah Chapman, those players were getting mixed first-team reps. Chapman and Horn, that's been slowly happening over the last couple of days. They would show off some of their own skills. I believe it was Chapman, Horn, and Kayvon who had a sack against Jared Goff. So the defensive front, as we expected, Dan, could be the strength of this defense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, the secondary still has its question marks. I don't believe they were terrible today in coverage. They gave up, quick passing game success to the Jared Goff and the Lions offense, but there are still communication errors. And that's still the thing that plagues this Giants defense. There was at least, I think the second play in 7-on-7 was a deep post that may have went down to the 5-yard line from like the opposite 35-yard line to Doris Fountain. It was 7-on-7 blown coverage. And then the first play of team period with Jameson Williams, he was just wide open on a deep post for a touchdown. No New York Giant near him. And I believe there was another pretty bad blown coverage. So the blown coverages, you hope that stops. And we expect this. New defense, a lot of it relies on communication. A lot of it relies on what the routes are being run by the Lions offense. So it's not necessarily a surprise, but remember James Betcher's defense? A lot of blown coverages throughout the season. I just hope that we don't see something like that because we've seen it happen several times with the first-team corners and the first-team safeties. A little bit of concern.
It makes sense, like you said, if you're going to a defense that's so functionally different than what we had, there's a chance for more communication breakdowns and lapses as you go through this process of training camp, especially when it's like, some might say, oh, well, we didn't see a lot of these with Wink. And it's like, well, a lot of Wink was cover one and just like man coverage. This is exactly a totally different ball game here. And that's why they plague James Betcher. And it's going to probably plague Shane Bowen and the Giants defense at times. We'd be foolish to say this isn't going to happen in the first 4 weeks of the season a few times, hopefully limited. And what could limit it though, and this is what we're all hoping, Because, when you look at practice today, and I think your overall assessment is the Giants' first team defense held its own against this first team Lions offense for the most part, which is insane, really, because defense A is expected to take some time, given the talent they have. B, they weren't really added much in free agency at all. A little bit in the draft, day two, both picks, but it's like day two, not the same as that premier pick. And against one of the best offenses in the NFL. And part of that, I think, or at least I'm hoping, Nick, is just the defensive line and the advantage the Giants are going to have with those players. And then a fresh Azeez Ojulari as well coming off the bench to give them a little more juice. And the hope, I think, at least, Nick, is that negates the secondary issues. But obviously, we're getting to a point now where the Cordell Flott scenario, like, I will be not surprised, I'll say, if we look back on tomorrow's practice or the day after and we start seeing, wow, Cordell Flott working with the second team. And at some point, the Giants just pull the trigger on this situation, pull the plug, I should say, on this situation and put someone else in his place.
Wouldn't surprise me. I will say Flott has had a few practices in a row that have been average. Today's practice, he got beat on a few. It's a little bit difficult to discern when the bolts are flying. I film to go over whose fault it is when there is a blown coverage. I'm going to imagine some of that it does land at the feet of Cordell Flott, but it does seem like it could also be the safeties. Flott did have a PBU today. I believe it was on a deep curl route, so there's something there. But either way, even if Flott strings together a few above average practices, I think Giant Nation is going to be concerned about Cordell Flott being their starting outside cornerback opposite of Deonte Banks heading into the season against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. It's just the reality of the situation. Kevin O'Connell is going to circle number 28, and he's just going to attack him relentlessly. And if it's Deonte Banks on Justin Jefferson, Jefferson is going to get his, but Banks can at least hold his own. So it's a concern, the secondary in general, and I'm just not certain the Giants are going to be able to rectify that situation yet. They can add depth pieces and people who can rotate in, but are they going to be able to find a reliable number 2 starting cornerback? I'm not sure. I'm hoping that we have that on the roster right now with Nick McCloud. And you know what, man? There's something about Nick McCloud that just stands out. The way he works his individual drills. He was off before practice doing just simple drills by himself. I believe it was Coach, it might have been, I can't remember exactly who it was. Somebody praised him today to the media as well. And it's just that drum beat is just really loud at this point. So when is he going to earn those outside snaps? We've seen him used everywhere, but at some point, I think the Giants got to at least mix him in there more consistently. But I don't know if they want to do that because Flott is on the roster. And I'm wondering how they want to judge that or weigh that right now.
It doesn't seem like they view the situation as dire as they have others. Like, for example, the center situation where they brought in Greg Van Roten, and he's immediately essentially taking the reps that they had guys like Austin Schlottman taking, and in the place of John Michael Schmitz, who we don't really know when he's going to be back at this point. I don't think we can, we have a rough timeline from Brian Daboll. And at corner, it doesn't seem like they're pushing the panic button just yet. So I think they want to give Flott a chance to work the kinks out in the new system. But I want to ask you about a couple other players that you got to see on the defense today. We have Brian Burns going up against what I would deem to be second, first, or third best right tackle in the NFL. And Penei Sewell, I assume he played on this practice, but I'm not positive.
He was out there, yeah.
Okay. We have Kayvon Thibodeaux going against, and obviously they flip sides at times, but we have Kayvon Thibodeaux going against, I would say, above average for sure tackle in the NFL. Taylor Decker, he's not elite by any means, but above average. And then the rest of the Giants defenders going against a pretty damn strong interior offensive line, one that includes, some people believe, one of the best centers, if not the best center in the NFL, Frank Ragnow. So what was the D-line, O-line matchup for the Giants against one of the best, if not the best offensive line in the NFL?
Giants defensive line won their reps. Again, as against the run, they were holding up, right? They built their own wall, and Brian Burns using his quickness to avoid Taylor Decker really helped as well. I thought Kayvon, he lost a few, but he also did really well at the point of attack. So I was pleased with the defensive line. So I was a little bit, hesitant to. I think this is a good challenge, a good litmus test for the defensive line. We know how physical and how tough the Lions' offensive line is. So I would say they held their own and played relatively well, all things considered.
Okay, that's good to hear, obviously. And what about Bobby Okereke, the linebacker? Because I saw him jump underneath a pass, make an interception. Seems to be a common thing for him now. Ever since like week 6 of last season, he's doing a much better job getting himself in passing lanes, putting himself in the right position, using his long arms to play a factor in the passing game as a linebacker. In a lot of ways, something that the Giants really haven't had any kind of consistency in from the linebacker position in a really, really long time from a pass coverage standpoint. So what'd you see today from Okereke?
He's one of the few indispensable players on this roster.
Yeah.
Right? You look at like Deonte Banks, he's indispensable. Dexter Lawrence, you can argue, is indispensable. I would say yes, because there's not a lot of depth behind him. But it's like, if the Giants lose this player, is their season over? And Bobby Okereke is one of those players at this point. I mean, I respect the depth of Deontay Johnson and Micah McFadden, but Okereke is the leader of this defense. And I think what he offers the New York Giants, what he provides the New York Giants in pass coverage is something that we should probably discuss even more, with those long arms and just his intelligence, because he just sank underneath this. I don't know if it was a crossing route from a number 2 receiver from the other side, but he was baiting Jared Goff the entire time, and Goff tried to put touch and just tried to layer it over the top of him, and he just jumped up, used those 34+ inch arms, and just came down with it. And he's constantly getting his hands on the football. So Okereke, been pleased with him in practice. I thought Isaiah Simmons had a really good practice. He had 2 PBUs. One was in the red zone against Amon-Ra St. Brown, where he just closed down, used his length, shut the window, the throwing window. And then there was another one that he tipped, but it ended up getting caught. That was in second team or third team, because Isaiah Simmons, he'll take snaps on all 3 teams at different positions, because the Giants are using him at nickel here, and then they're using him at linebacker there. But Simmons is another player who set the tone early on in 7-on-7s. Slant pass right in his area was caught. Simmons just laid the wood on a Lions wide receiver. It wasn't Amon-Ra St. Brown, but still just laid the wood on this guy. And I feel like he was another player that stood out in today's practice.
I'm excited to see his transition and his involvement in this defense, because I do think he's got, look, you said it best, I think, a week or 2 ago. Like, you're like, let's not think the Giants are going to get the 6th overall pick or whatever he originally was to break out in year 6. That's just, or whatever it is for year 5 or year 6. It's just very unlikely at the NFL level for a year 5, year 6 total breakout. But he could be a player that's more effective than he was in this defense versus last year's defense. And I think he's still got a different level of twitch and athleticism than a lot of the players the Giants can put in the role that they're playing him in right now. And that could lead to really big upside for this defense. And I think he could be a big piece of it, not the number 1 piece or anything like that, but just a big contributing factor. So I'm happy to hear that he continues to play good football.
Yeah, just have him pin his ears back. When he can pin his ears back and drop into coverage, he can do a lot of different things for you, and he's having a good camp.
Like a good space player, too. I just think they need guys with athleticism in space in today's game. Like, it might not matter for 80% of the games we watch, Nick, and it doesn't for against a lot of these offenses. But then when you see those offenses like last year, the 49ers, for example, you remember the Giants 49ers game, that's early in the season, Nick. The Giants had a lot of their pieces still on the defense side of the football. Even Leonard Williams was on the team for that, and they looked totally outmatched in space. The 49ers just ran circles on them in space. That style of offense, getting that amount of playmakers on the field at once that the Niners have, once you get to that second level, crossing routes, the way they run those crossers with Ayuk and Samuel, and just the different types of route combinations you can put out there in the middle of the field in that second level, Giants need to get more athletes, in my opinion, on the field. Bobby Okereke was a good start. Isaiah Simmons, if he can evolve into a role, is another good, start for them. And then to get a lot of these DBs up to speed, Newbin, Dane Belton, a lot of these guys that can really help them. So any other thoughts on the defense, since you had so much time to kind of focus in on that side of the ball?
Defensively, I saw Micah McFadden miss a tackle on David Montgomery. Again, I praised Montgomery earlier on, man. That guy has eyes in the back of his head. He was anticipating these backside cuts and taking advantage of over-aggressive New York Giants who are trying to beat him to a certain point. And that's just an underrated skill for a running back. And Drew Phillips brought him up as well. I just think he is got in like 3 altercations, and I wouldn't say he was the asshole in really any of them, right? He's just playing with a chip on his shoulder, and he looks like he might have that inside path to being the starting nickel defender. And the teammates just loved the way he was playing Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even after the drills, after there was like 2 or 3 altercations with Amon-Ra St. Brown came up to Drew Phillips and slapped him on the head and showed a sign of respect to him. So it's something that I picked up on in practice, where I was just like, that's going up against you're a rookie who is still struggling, I think, to really comprehend the defense. He's had coverage lapses in almost every single practice that I've seen, where he's just trying to push somebody where there's no one to push it to. Things like that, things that I believe will be rectified. And it's not necessarily a damning issue on the kid. He's just new to the NFL, and the speed is a lot for him. There's a lot he has to digest. But to go up against a top 5 wide receiver and hold your own, relatively speaking, I think is something that he should be proud of, and something that Giant fans should be encouraged by.
I want to back it up real quick there, but first I want to say after practice, it's funny that you said that they kind of made up in practice with the Monra giving the pat, because after practice, Drew was like, I think I just played him really good on a rep, and he didn't like that. So I thought that was a really funny line as confidence that you need. Like, the corner's position that's based on confidence. When you feel that confidence level, you play your best football. But I will ask you something.
By the way, that's a spot on take. That's what we all thought, like the media. That's what we were talking about. It's like, I think he just didn't appreciate how good Andrew Phillips played him, and that Drew Phillips wasn't paying deference to Amon-Ra St. Brown, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Right, exactly that. It's like, I'm going to play a physical level. I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to play you pretty damn close to the vest, and it's practice, joint practice, and I'm on right. No, I'm a pro. I'm the star. You don't touch me. It's like some of these guys feel like they think they have a red jersey on, like a quarterback, when they don't. But back it up when you're, because I think we can sometimes gloss over stuff that's a little bit more. I knew where you were going with it, but I don't think some people might think you're talking about something completely different when you're talking about the corner pushing players. You're talking about what? Break that down. Yeah. Because I think some people might think you meant physically push.
Yeah, no, thank you for stopping me there. So a push, what I mean by that, when a corner pushes a player, if you're playing a zone match type of system and you're originally aligned over a wide receiver, and that wide receiver is going inside, what you do is you push. And what I mean by that is not a physical thing, is you are taking your responsibility, and then you're saying to a player who is to the side of you, now he's your responsibility because he's going into your zone. And now I have to assume somebody else who's coming from another area of the field. That's what it means when someone says they're pushing their responsibility. I'm going to push my original assignment to you and then assume another assignment. But on that play that I'm referring to, it was a few practices ago, the player he was pushing the wide receiver to was already vacated by a drag route. It was a really well-designed play by Brian Daboll. It was the play where Malik Neighbors was off the line of scrimmage, given a free release, and was left basically wide open, I believe, because Andrew Phillips had a miscommunication and didn't assume Malik Neighbors, who was originally the number 3.
And that breakdown, and that breakdown probably gives you guys a good idea of what we're talking about when we're saying that, when you're going to this style of defense, we've been discussing for the last few months now, pattern match principles, and a totally different defense than the 1 week Martindale ran. There's going to be reliance on communication. Like, that breakdown you gave, anyone who listens to that should be like, yeah, it's going to require these DBs being on the same page all the time, a lot of the time, and understanding different round concepts and how they impact the rest of the play. And
this stuff changes as well.
Yep.
Based on what the offensive formation is. If the offense is in a 3-by-1, it's going to change. If they're in a 2-by-2, it's going to change. If there's a fast 3 or a fast 4, meaning a running back right before the snap who is flaring out to a certain direction, that's going to change the responsibility. So a cohesive unit is the best type of unit, and we're hoping that the Giants secondary can solidify and develop that. But having uncertainties next to Deonte Banks at the cornerback position could stifle that too, right? True. Because we want to see changes, but it's going to take a little bit for Cordell Flott to get comfortable. It's going to take a little bit for Drew Phillips to get comfortable. And if we're just rotating guys in and out of first team, that's going to affect the cohesiveness.
That's a great point. And that's something the Giants are going to have to chew on. That's a battle they'll have to have internally for the rest of camp, because it's going to take a lot anyway just to get these guys on the same page, even if it was the same guys every day. But now you're also dealing with, well, on one hand, we want to make sure the communication is correct in a defense that requires it so much. The other, we want to make sure that we have the best guys out there, and we don't really know for sure who those best guys are besides Deonte Banks. And I guess, you could probably pencil in Jason Pinnock as well for the role he's going to play. But that leaves open another 4, 5, 6 guys in sub packages that really have to be hammered home. And then once the Giants lock it in, I feel like we'll see a little bit of a jump in less of these communication breakdown issues, but we'll see.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
All right, offensive side of the ball. You know, last time we talked, Nick, we discussed a few things. We discussed a running back rotation that's kind of starting to shape itself up. Tyrone Tracy getting a lot of first team reps relative to what we expected. Wide receiver position, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton kind of mixing in together, Hyatt having a little bit of the upper hand. Tight end situation, Theo Johnson getting a lot of teamwork, getting a lot of receptions. What's going on there? Where do you want to start? I want to focus first on those 3 skill positions. And if you saw anything in today's practice with regards to any of those 3.
Yeah, so I was on the far end. I didn't really get to evaluate the team periods for the offense. I did see the red zone drills. And look, man, Malik Nabers is legit. I saw one play in the red zone drill that actually sparked one of the skirmishes where it was a designed rollout for Daniel Jones from the shotgun where he caught it And then he starts rolling to his right. Malik Neighbors was the innermost. I believe he was the number 3 wide receiver, basically right next to the offensive tackle. And what he did was he just stepped inside and then he flowed outside underneath Daniel Jones. And as Jones rolled to the numbers, Neighbors just sat. And Jones whipped him a pass just probably outside of the hash where Neighbors caught it, and he was going into the end zone, and he got tackled pretty hard. And then a bunch of people ended up fighting because Neighbors got hit down on the ground. But the focal point of Malik Neighbors, I mean, we talk about it so often now, but it's important, man. This is a true star type of wide receiver, and I'm just very excited about it because not only is he winning vertically down the football field like we've seen all camp, but these little plays like this that the Giants have been effective running the last 2 years, they're going to manifest in the red zone. And we've seen Kafka and Dable design great plays in the red zone over the last 2 years. And I think that's going to happen a lot frequently early on throughout the season as well. When teams are hyper-focusing on him, like we said in previous podcasts, it's going to open up opportunities for other players. And I think the Giants have enough skill to capitalize on those opportunities.
Yeah, and there's going to be just like a nice over-reliance on getting him the football from what it seems clear. Today, Jordan Ronan tweeted out that he had 8 targets in this joint practice, which is absurd. I think Daniel Jones is getting to the point where he's just like, look, a lot of things I've tried here as quarterback of the New York Giants. I've had a lot of time. Nothing I've really been able to find consistency with. This may be the guy. This may be the one that I finally can lean on and find consistency with. Like, drop back, be aware of what everything is going on the football field. But as long as they're not allocating a million resources toward Neighbors, get him the football. And I saw that a lot on some of the video clips I've seen today and throughout practice. Just get him the ball. Comeback routes where you can create that separation by running and by faking, the vertical stem and just making that little cut that he's able to make, breaking down, getting back to the football, gives the quarterback so much space in front, right? He just puts the ball out there. I've seen Jones do that multiple times, easy solutions. And then the one we saw, the big one, just kind of you get one-on-one. Don't think too much, Daniel's thinking. I'm assuming at this point, Nick, and just get the ball up and out there to the guy. Because maybe that's the level of confidence you didn't have in Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, and Wan'Dale Robinson last year. For good reason. These guys are not, we like all those players, but they're not nearly at the level of a Neighbors.
No, they're not. And we brought the running back position. Eric Gray took a shot in second team from Maurice Norris, where his helmet came flying off Eric Gray's. But Dante Miller worked in with first team reps once again. And while he was also receiving third team reps in the red zone period, he had probably one of the better runs of the day that I saw, mostly red zone runs, where it was an A gap. I think it was just like a halfback dive. He hit the hole. No one touched him. It didn't really seem like, and he just kind of like ran through one tackle near the goal line for the touchdown though at that point. And I don't know, I talked to him a little bit after practice along with Ed Valentine, and I'm hoping this kid makes the roster because I think he just offers something so different. And I think that camp battle right now between him and Eric Gray, it's maybe tighter than we originally anticipated. That's at least my perception of it, because he is working in with the first team along with Tyrone Tracy, who is solidified, I would say, at this point as that number 2 back behind Devin Singletary. So now it just comes down to Gray and Miller.
Wow, that's an interesting development. You feel that Tyrone Tracy is now locked in that RB2 job, or just at this time?
I think he is. Just judging by now, nothing's ever a lock. It could be lost, a fumble or something. But
yeah,
you judge it by who's receiving the first team reps. It's Singletary's the obvious one, but 29 is out there a lot with the first team. You see a lot of 29, and now you're seeing 25 mixed in there as well. Right. Eric Gray, not as much. Eric Gray's getting third team and second team. He gets some, I believe, first team, but I didn't see any today. But again, I wasn't with the offense. So it's just a interesting development. You just think, look, Eric Gray, I don't know if the Giants really wanted Eric Gray, desired to draft Eric Gray. I think they wanted somebody who could specialize as a kick returner, but they traded their 4th round pick that year to move up to select Deonte Banks. And then I want to say there were times where Joe Schoen has intimated that there were kick returners that went before that 5th round pick. I want to say he said that in the past, and I can't remember exactly when. And we know that was Eric Gray's desired role was, let's put him at kick return. Punt return. It just did not work out at all. And if we want to look back on the 2022 season, that was a big deal with the Adoree Jackson injury and everything. So I'm just, I'm thinking you could probably squeak him through the practice squad. Who is going to claim Eric Gray?
Yeah. I mean, you're probably right.
So again, I'm solidifying and stamping it, but these next couple practices and throughout the preseason are going to be massive for that matchup between Dante Miller and Eric Gray.
We put a lot of time as a podcast, and I'm sure the listeners are grouped into this as well, Nick, into every draft pick the Giants make. But then I always like to make it clear, and I do this a lot through draft season, not as much when we're out of it, that 5th through 7th round picks are not locks for the roster in any year. First year, they have a good leg up to making the roster. After year 1, that's it. Like, old regimes have hung on to players for a long time trying to prove them right. But this doesn't feel like that kind of regime to me. I've seen Brian Daboll make a lot of good calls so far as a head coach, deferring not to salary, but deferring to who the best players are on the field. And Dante Turbo Miller is a better player on the field than Eric Gray. And in addition to that, offers something that Gray doesn't, which is kind of that juice and that raw speed. While Gray may be more of like a Devin Singletary type running back, now you have different flavors, and you're not getting that different flavor from Eric Gray. And you can lean on it and say, oh, well, he was my 5th round pick that I handpicked, and this guy was just a UDFA. Or you could just say, let's see what's happening on film in practice, and let's see what each of them can offer toward what our offense wants to do in the actual regular season games. And that decision might more easily than we think, come down to Miller.
Look, Joel Thomas coached under Sean Payton, so a lot of the running back usage gets ascribed to Sean Payton, rightfully so, but he was still a running back coach there. And think about some of the running backs that went through the Saints running back room over the years. Like a Dante Miller is a type of archetype that I think fits in better than someone like Eric Gray when you have a skill set like Devin Singletary already on the roster.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll see how the Giants feel about that. It's going to be very interesting, because I would say more than likely only one of the two is going to make the roster, just given the depth at a lot of these other positions. How about tight end? What's going on there? Is Theo Johnson really taking as much control as we've heard of this potential tight? Is he even in the mix for tight end 1?
I would say so, but again, I didn't watch the offense, so I don't know the snap allocation, but I do know when we were talking to Mike Kafka last Thursday, I asked about the tight end room, and he mentioned something to the effect of we're bringing him along slowly. And at that point, he was already receiving a decent amount of first team reps. So I would think so, right? And I think Daniel Bellinger, I talked with him after practice as well. I got to meet him, nice. Finally. Cool. Yeah, we dabbed each other up, had a nice little conversation. And Daniel's talking about, I'm just doing whatever the team asked me to do. I've seen him be used as fullback, seen him be used as H-back. Talked about a bunch of little things of that nature. And I think Bellinger's going to certainly have a role, as will Lawrence Cager and as will Chris Manhertz. I think the Giants are going to be creative with how they use them. But Theo Johnson started training camp a little bit injured, and now you're seeing him get first team reps. That's a slow engine right there that we're starting to see pick up some steam. And I think it's something we should pay attention to. But the Giants aren't going to phase Daniel Bellinger out, and the Giants aren't going to – I don't think the Giants are going to have a de facto number 1 tight end like we've seen in recent memory, because they had Darren Waller. And in the previous year, they had Bellinger and Tanner Hudson, who they also use. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a diversified workload for those 4 tight ends.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, because the Giants aren't going to just completely shy away from 12 personnel. I think we're still going to see it a lot. And it's interesting you got a chance to talk with Bellinger. Shout out Daniel Bellinger for being on the show a couple times. I'm glad it's cool that he recognized you and you got to talk a little bit. But I like that what he mentioned to you was that there's going to be some different looks for him in this offense. And when they go to 12 personnel, maybe it is Theo as the Y, but maybe it's Bellinger as the H-back. Maybe it's Bellinger as the motion or the big slot out there. And you're just going to see different looks that give the Giants a little bit more flexibility as an offense and unpredictability. If you have Bellinger and Theo Johnson on the field, that does give you a chance to create a big explosive run play as well.
It does. And he can operate. He is a good enough football player, Daniel Bellinger, that his presence is 12 personnel, but it's also 21 personnel, because he can be a fullback. And the Giants have used him as such to go vertical from an I formation or an offset I or a weak or strong I. And when I was talking to Bellinger, he mentioned something today. He was like, yeah, we had a play dialed up that was like that, but the Lions were in a different coverage. So I ended up adjusting, and I didn't get to see exactly what was going on. But I think we're going to see him used in that fullback role out of the backfield, because I think we know he can hit being a lead blocker. I think he can also be a mismatch guy against linebackers when he is coming from the backfield like that.
All right, let's get to story of the day that we didn't discuss yet. It's not typically a Big Blue Banter priority, but it is a priority of the fans, and I think we're at least somewhat interested in it. And it's the story of the day, Nick. So, of course, it comes 35 minutes into the show instead of the beginning, which is just our thing. But let's talk about the fight. Let's talk about the fights. Any thoughts on the fights? Giants fighting at practice? Anything you saw? Anything you picked up on? Anything you heard? Anything like that?
brought it up a bunch earlier. Yeah, man, there were
People want to hear about the fights. They want more than just a bring it up type of thing.
Yeah, no, Andrew Phillips, like I said a little bit earlier, Andrew Phillips was the impetus to a few of them because of his hard play with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know how to say his first name, Yadni Kajust, one of the last plays of practice. He dominated the edge that he was against. I couldn't catch the number of the edge that he was against. He dominated him, third team reps, right? Threw him to the ground and everything. And then I looked at the pass or whatever it was in the end zone. And then I looked back and people are running into a scrum. And I see this dude bobbing and weaving and like kind of throwing punches. Look like George Foreman out there against Levi Onwuzurike of the Lions. And I was like, yo, and that was the last fight of the day. It was one of the last plays of the day. You had the one with Greg Van Roten and the defensive lineman where Daniel Jones ended up getting involved. That fight happened, I want to say, a play after Daniel Jones' arm was hit when he was throwing. And Jones was asked by the media after practice, were you hit on that play? And he was like, yeah. And then someone was like, is that something that typically happens in these joint practices? Like, not typically. We don't usually get.
It's a big no-no. Even the coaches are supposed to agree upon it. And it's like one of those like known things.
I think that was Levi Onwuzurike too on that play. And Greg Van Roten might have took exception to that. I'm a little unsure of how that manifested or what exactly happened. But yeah, that was another fight. And there was a scrum when Malik Neighbors was hit. There was a lot of
fights.
Yeah. Again, it was like 7 or 8 of them. It was a pretty physical and
guys have been practicing against each other for a week and a half straight. Hot days, both in Detroit and here in New Jersey. It's super humid. The temper, that at some point you want to take it out on somebody, and you can't take it out the same way on your teammates. You don't want to start fights in practice. I know the Steelers do that a couple times a year, but you don't want to do that all the time. It's not expected, but in these practices, you can go ahead and just let loose. Seems like, at least.
The Lions too, they were held up by about 6 hours yesterday in traveling to New Jersey because of the thunderstorms and everything. So they were probably tired. Like, they probably were not about having that, right? But that's something else to consider. And another thing, Dan Campbell's press conference, that guy lives up to his reputation for sure. Like, you could just there's an aura about that guy. Like, there's a charisma about Dan Campbell that is very endearing. And he's very good with the media, as is Brian Daboll, but certainly different two types of.
He's all about like that physicality, Dan Campbell, right? And that fight mentality. So maybe they thought they could just walk in here and stomp all over the Giants. Like, this is the Giants. They're one of the worst teams. We're the Lions. We're a physical team. No, that wasn't the case. The Giants are just going to stand down clearly, and they're not just going to take it. And that's something that, long flight, you got delayed, whatever. Step up, because these are going to be grueling practices, and you're going against another NFL team. And this NFL team's not going to just lay down, which is great news, by the way, for Brian Daboll, I would say, and his tenure and his chance to continue to be coach in the New York Giants, which I know was highly discussed. I think last week, one of the dudes from WFAN said, I'll tell you what, I think they're going to go to Belichick next year or something like that, and hire Belichick. And I forgot what it was, Belichick and someone else. They said Belichick and Dak is what I heard as the rumor. But, don't count this dude out yet, Daboll. This team likes playing for him, and now they're playing tough and physical ball. So I'm excited about that.
He's also really good with the media. Like, before practice, like, he did his little press conference, then he went off to practice. And the media, we didn't really know exactly where to go because there were 2 fields. So he actually came over to us, like, flagged us down and was like, hey, this is the practice breakdown, and gave us the practice breakdown so we could organize and send, because there's 2 members from certain media outlets to cover it. So I felt like that was just a kind gesture from Coach Daboll. And speaking of the physicality, poor Terrion Arnold had his welcome to the NFL moment against Andrew Thomas. Now that sucks. I think Terrion Arnold ended up getting a concussion or going to the protocol because of that. So that's very unfortunate. And I think he's a phenomenal football player. But I love that play, and I hope the Giants continue to run that. But we didn't see it a lot last year because Andrew Thomas was hurt most of the season, but we saw a little bit in 2022, and it is a pin pull concept from a condensed set where Isaiah Hodgins blocks down and he pins the pursuing linebacker, and that allows, or the edge, and that allows Andrew Thomas to just pull around, and it's Andrew Thomas isolated in space against a safety or against a cornerback. And Thomas is one of the better movers as an offensive tackle. So I'm hoping that we see those type of power gap concepts to the field side just to fully maximize and utilize the overall movement skills and skill set of Andrew Thomas.
Yeah. And Andrew Thomas on that play, on that rep, I think he did a good job breaking down one of the angles of it, Nick, which had the sound too. You could hear the pop on contact from Thomas against Darian Arnold. But he just looked completely different moving there in space than he did at any point last year. And we watched a lot of tape of him. I know he gutted it out and he played through the injury last year and somehow was pretty damn effective in pass pro. But he even said after the season, I believe it was a few months ago in June with John Schmelk in an interview with Giants.com, he's like, I didn't feel like I could move the way I wanted to in the run game specifically. And that is an example now of him moving the way he wants to in the run game. And look at the impact it makes. He clears out that corner or that safety or whoever it's going to be in the regular season. And he gives the running back an opportunity to make a really big play in space, whoever that may be.
A few other notes too. Raheem Nunez-Roches was pretty active again next to Dexter Lawrence, getting into the backfield, caused a holding penalty. Giants defensive line caused a few holding penalties, which you'd love to see. Caused a couple false starts as well from the Lions. So the Lions offense was a little sloppy from that regard, but you love to see your defensive line getting held up by these guys, especially a unit as talented as a Lions offensive line. But Nacho, I think he could be a more useful player this year than what we saw last season. And I'm hoping that he lives up to that, because I think he's like against the run, man, he's been good all camp. And today he also had a few reps as a pass rusher that showcased, hey man, he might have a little bit more than maybe we've given him credit for. He's not going to be a dynamic pass rusher, but he's been working on moves all offseason with Dre Patterson. And hopefully that is something that we realize come week 1.
Yeah, it's important to note Dre Patterson's our best position coach, at least according to the track record and what we know of what these position coaches do, and just looking at the development of some of our players. So I'm keeping an eye on all those interior guys. I even thought I saw a nice rep from Jordan Phillips on the interior in the one-on-ones that somebody posted on Twitter. That's the guy I still have a little bit of hope for. He's like a sleeper for me, because I just think when you're that, it's like a Planet Theory type sleeper.
That guy's been missing all camp.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
Never see Jordan Phillips out there in like team period with the first team. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, surprising.
2 other guys. Boogie had a sack in second team,
right? Oh, second team.
It was second or third. I think it was second team, because Azeez was the one who really caused it. Azeez bent the edge, forced Nate Sudfeld to step up into the pocket, and then Boogie 55 just hit. Yeah, I know. I was like,
is number 8 gets their second team reps over Hooker? That's so disappointing.
Yeah, I was talking to a Lions beat guy, and he said that they swapped though. They flipped. Sudfeld might have an edge on Hendon Hooker right now, but it hasn't been that consistent throughout camp, according to him. But Azeez Ojulari was another player that I was like, oh man, he's beating this backup tackle up the arc like almost every single play. He still has that speed, that bend, and that burst, baby. And him as a third rusher for the Giants could be dangerous if the Giants can get in a 3rd and long situations.
Yeah, it's a nice secret hidden weapon for the Giants this year. It really should be. Hopefully, we're hoping at least that, not playing that full starter role and all those snaps can help take a little bit of the wear and tear off for Azeez. Just a nice extra addition to this defense. Anything else that we missed from today's practice, Nick?
No, man, I think we're good. I'm ready to tackle it tomorrow, man.
Nice.
I'll be there again. So
good stuff. I'm excited to hear about it tomorrow. For the rest of you, listen in, tune in. Obviously, as you just heard, we're getting another one of these recaps tomorrow. Hopefully there's even more to talk about. Less fights, more Giants offense I'm looking forward to, because I want to see how the Giants offense does against this evolving Lions defense. But keep it locked and loaded. If you enjoy, please rate and subscribe on iTunes. Please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. We get a lot of views. Last one of these did like 4K, but not a lot of likes. We need to get those likes up. So keep it locked and loaded, and we'll talk to you soon.